Right, so let's set up some variables now. So we'll add a global variable called score, and we'll add a global variable called is alive, to check if the player is alive or not. Now we'll add a system event on start of the layout. We're going to set alive to true. We're going to set the score to 0. And we're going to wait 3 seconds before the game starts. So we'll wait 3 seconds for the game to start. Now we'll have things that happen every tick. One of them will be updating the score. So we want to go to our text and set our text to score. We're going to grab the variable there for score. So we constantly update the score. Now let's add all our enemies to a family, so we can treat all these enemies as a group. So let's go to families over here and go add family, and we want to have our enemies in the family, and we'll call the family enemies. Right, that makes things easier. Now we can address these 3 different types of enemies as a group. So what we'll do every tick with the enemies is we'll add a sub event here. Add a sub event. What we'll do with the enemies is we will compare their opacity, and if their opacity is less than 100, because we're going to fade these enemies in, then we will add to their opacity. So we'll say set opacity to self dot opacity, and we can add any number here. Let's try 4. Done. Okay. And I realize now we also need the little collectibles. So we're going to add another sprite. We'll call it collectible or reward. And it's going to be just the white ones, and these are also going to be tiny, 10 by 10. Let's make them slightly bigger, 15 by 15. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll also fade in the collectibles as well. So what we'll do is add a sub event here, and it'll be the collectibles, and we'll do the same, compare their opacity. If it's less than 100, we're going to fade the collectible in as well. Collectible, set opacity to self dot opacity plus 4. Okay, so we're going to fade in those collectibles as well. So we are going to have to make sure then that the starting opacity for the collectibles is 0, and for the enemies is also 0. So now we'll see that they fade in. Okay, let's just double check that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, 4 might be a little quick. Might make it 1. Right, so we're fading those enemies in. Now, if the player is alive, so let's add another sub-event, and we'll say system Boolean set is alive, right? Then we will add to enemy rotate, and we'll get the enemy to rotate clockwise 1 degree, and the player can rotate in the other direction. So we'll add the player to rotate counterclockwise 1 degree. So you'll see now that the player and the enemies are rotating. Now we want to be able to move the player around with our touch of a finger. So we're going to have to add touch controls to the player. So what we'll have to do is add another condition here, and we need touch, but it's not here, so we have to add it to the layout. So let's add touch to the layout. Now it's available. So if we come back to our event sheet, we can add a subcondition touch, and we can check to see if it is in touch. And if it is in touch, we actually need another condition here, that the player is alive. So if you're touching the player and the player is alive, then you can set the player's position. So we can go player, set position to touch X and touch Y. Touch.x and touch Y. Done. Now if we run it, we'll be able to move the player around. I know we're using a mouse cursor here, but on a screen you wouldn't see the mouse cursor. There's also a way to turn the mouse cursor off in Construct. If we double click and add mouse to the environment, then what we can do is on every tick we can add an action mouse cursor style to none, and now you won't see the mouse, so we can just move our player around without the cursor. Makes it a bit harder on PC, but you wouldn't see the cursor on a cell phone. Right, what's next? Well, let's add a point to the score if you hit a collectible. So this is also part of every tick, so we'll add another subcondition. So if the player is colliding or even overlapping a collectible, then we want to add 1 to score and destroy the collectible. Collectible destroy. Okay, so we've only got 1 collectible at the moment, but this should work already. So if I find my guy there, okay, so we grab him and we get 1. Now, what happens when that collectible is destroyed? If the collectible is destroyed and it's overlapping with our player, then we want to do our little particle effect. So let's add an event, and this event will be collectible on destroyed, and the other condition is that it's also the collectible, or actually the player is overlapping the collectible. So if the collectible is being destroyed because it's overlapping the player, then we're going to spawn our little particles. Then we're going to add an action. It's going to be on the collectible, and we're going to spawn another object, and it's going to be our player particle, and we're going to spawn it on the game objects layer, which I've spelled incorrectly, and that should be fine. So let's just see how that works. So grab our guy, and there we go. We can fix these. We can fix the effect. For now it's just the default effect, but it works.
Game Dev Journey.